Oh man, I was talking the whole time on mute, so I must apologize for the last minute. Now I see it moving. Thank you, all those who have just joined us once again. This is the LEV Project, Lift Every Voice, an extension of Take Time to Heal, where we are reading the slave narratives that were left on record. Not only just the slave narratives, but at this point, we're reading the narratives in hopes that we can get a better understanding and more of a grip on our history for the purposes of healing. Like I said, we read earlier chapter 12. So going forward, I'm going to try to do double up and do 2 in a day so that we can make sure that we finish before the end of the month. So we'll be ready to start a new narrative. Now, for those who haven't heard the big controversy all over about do we need Black History Month, and I don't really think we need it because it's American history. You know, that's a lot of people who speaking in a hypothetical. And some of those same people, if you ask, are you an advocate in your everyday life for this said history? Oftentimes, you know, the answer is no. And so, you know, it's a blessing that at the beginning of the year, we started off before all of this controversy that no, it doesn't have to be relegated to a week or a month, but this can be a part of where we give an hour a day. You don't have to spend the whole entire day, but give an hour out of your day just to give a voice to those who've come before you and gain some understanding of where we've been. So praise be to the Most High for our insight in this LEV project, having started it before there was even any hoopla on the subject. As we are winding down here, so many people are going to be looking for Black history projects and Black history this and Black history that. So hopefully we'll get some new people tuning in and finding the value in what we have already found. Like I said, last chapter, a lot of stuff went on concerning the man who, Paul was his name, who Charles found in the woods with a iron bell around his neck, who went on to take his life, which was a very sad chapter. So again, if you've missed it, go ahead and check that back out. Let me make sure I share this on social media and then I'll get started. If anybody would like to read, I did see an elder tell me that she wanted to read, but she hadn't received her book yet. I know it's online, so you definitely can read it from the narrative. You can just click on it and be able to read it. So I think I posted it. So let me just post it and share it once again, and then I will get started. One minute. And if you have any questions, I believe there's a comment box on the side. And so you can definitely leave your comments or whatever you have to share concerning what you've learned so far, or how you feel and what you've learned, or whatever the case may be as it relates to this narrative. We'd love to hear it because each one teach one, and we learn by sharing with one another. So in 1 second, and then I shall begin chapter 13. I'm having a bad scarf day these days. Not really, I'm just chilling. So, you know, I don't really turn on the camera, but let's get started. A bad scarf day. Chapter 13. It says, an affair was now in progress, which, though the persons who were actors in it were far removed from me, had in its effects a great influence upon the fortunes of my life. I have informed the reader that my master had 3 daughters, and the second of the sisters was deemed a great beauty. The eldest and the 3 were married about the time of which I now write to a planter of great wealth who resided near Columbia. But the second had formed an attachment to a young gentleman whom she frequently seen at the church attended by the master's family. As this young man, either from want of wealth or proper person to introduce him, had never been at my master's house, my young mistress had no opportunity of communicating to him the sentiments she entertained towards him, without violating the rules of modesty in which she had been educated. Before she would attempt anything which might be deemed a violation of the decorum of her sex, she determined to take a new method of obtaining a husband. She communicated to her father, my master, a knowledge of the whole affair, with a desire that he would invite the gentleman of her choice to his house. This the father resolutely opposed, upon the ground that the young man upon whom his daughter had fixed her heart was without property. and consequently destitute of means of supporting his daughter in a style suitable to the rank she occupied in society. So far prevailed over the affections, or more probably the fears of her father, that he introduced the young man to his family, and about 2 months afterward my young mistress was a bride. But it had been agreed upon all the parties, as I understood before the marriage, that the son-in-law had no land or slaves of his own. He should remove with his wife to a large tract of land that my master owned in the new purchase in the state of Georgia. In the month of September, my master came to the quarter one evening at the time of our return from the field, and in company with his son-in-law, and informed me that he had given me with a number of other of his slaves to his daughter, and that I, with 8 other men and 2 or 3 women, must be set out on the next Sunday with my new master for his estate in Georgia. Whether we were to go to clear land, build houses, and make other improvements necessary for the reception of the newly married lady in the following spring. I was much pleased with the appearance of manners of my new master, who was a young man, apparently 27 or 8 years old, and of good figure. We were to take with us in our expedition to Georgia a wagon to be drawn by 6 mules, and I was appointed to drive the team. Before we set off, my young master came in person to the quarter and told us that all those who were going to the new settlement must come to the house, where she furnished each of us with 2 full suits of clothes, one of coarse woolen and the other of hemp cloth. She also gave a hat to each of us and 2 pairs of shoes with a trifle in money, and enjoined us to be good boys and girls and get things ready for her, and that when she would come to live with us, we should not be forgotten. The conduct of this young lady was so different from that which I had been accustomed to witness since I came to Carolina, that I considered myself highly fortunate in becoming her slave, and now congratulated myself with the ideas that I should in future have a mistress who would treat me kindly, and if I behaved well, would not permit me to want. At the time appointed, we set out for Georgia with all the tools and implements necessary to the prosecution of a new settlement. My young master accompanied us and traveled slowly for several days to enable me to keep up with him. He continued our march in this order until we reached the Savannah River at the town of Augusta, where my master told me that he was so well satisfied with my conduct that he intended to leave me with the team to bring on the goods and the women and the children, but that he would take the men and push on as fast as possible to the new settlement and go to work until the time of my arrival. He gave me directions to follow on and inquire for Morgan County Courthouse, and said that he would have a person ready there on my arrival to guide me to him and the people with him. He then gave me $20 to buy food for the mules and provisions for myself and those with me, and left me on the high road. He was very trusting, and left me on the high road. Where am I here? Master of myself and the team. I was resolved that this striking proof of confidence on the part of my master should not be subject of regret to him, and pursued my route with the greatest diligence, taking care to lay out as little money as possible for such things as I had to buy. On the 6th day in the morning, I arrived at our new settlement in the middle of a heavy forest of such timber as is common to that country, with $3.25 in my pocket, part of the money given to me in Augusta. This I offered to return, but my master refused to take it and told me to keep it for my good conduct. I now felt assured that all my troubles in this world were ended, and that in fact I might look forward to a life of happiness and ease, for I did not consider labor any hardship, if I was well provided with good food and clothes, and my wants properly regarded. He didn't remember nothing about. Let me not say that. Let me continue. For those who just joined us, we're reading chapter 13. He left the plantation. He was sent off with the daughter and her new husband, and they were going to Georgia now. So he's feeling like everything's about to be all good. My master and the people who were with him had, before our arrival with the wagon, put up the logs of 2 cabins and were engaged when we came in, covering one of them with clapboards. In the course of the next day, we completed both these cabins, with puncheon floors, and small glass windows, the sash and the glass for which I had brought in the wagon. We put up 2 other cabins and stables for the mules, and then began to clear land. After a few days, my master told me he meant to go down into the settlements to buy provisions for the winter, and that he should leave me to oversee the lands and carry on the work in his absence. He accordingly left us, taking with him the wagon and 2 boys, one to drive the team and another to drive cattle and hogs, which he intended to buy and drive to our settlement. I now felt myself almost proprietor of our new establishment, and believed the men left under my charge did not consider me a very lenient overseer. I, in truth, compelled them to work very hard, as I did myself. At the end of the week, my master returned with a heavy load of meal and bacon, with salt and other things that we needed. And the day following, a white man drove to our station several cows and more than 20 hogs, the greater part of which we were breeders. At this season of the year, neither the hogs nor cattle required any feeding at our hands. The woods were full of nuts and the grass was abundant, but we gave salt to our stock and kept the hogs in the pen 2 or 3 days to accustom them to the place. We now live very differently from what we did on my old master's plantation. We had as much bacon every day as we could eat. There you go again. Which together with bread and sweet potatoes, which we had at will, constituted our fare. My master remained with us more than 2 months, within which time we had cleared 40 acres of ground ready for the plow. But a few days before Christmas, an event took place, which in its consequences destroyed all my prospects of happiness and totally changed the future path of my life. A messenger one day came to our settlement with a letter, which had been forwarded in this matter by the postmaster at the courthouse, where the post office was kept. This letter contained intelligence of the sudden death of my old master, and that difficulties had arisen in the house which required the immediate attention of my young one. The letter was written by my mistress. My master's forthwith took an account of the stock of provision and other things that he had on hand, and putting the whole under my charge, gave me directions to attend to the work, and set off on horseback that evening, promising to return within 1 month at furthest. We never seen him again, and heard nothing of him until late in the month of January, when the eldest son of my late master came to our settlement in company with a strange gentleman. The son of my late master informed me, to my surprise and sorrow, that my young master, who had brought us to Georgia, was dead, and that he and the gentleman with him were administrators of the deceased, and had come to Georgia for the purpose of letting out on lease for the period of 7 years our place with all the people on it, including me. Oh man, they just stood there too. I don't know if I would have stood there, but anywho, for those who have just joined us, we're in chapter 13, 50 years in chains. In all parts of the cotton country, there are numerous taverns which answer the double purpose of drinking and gambling houses. These places are kept by men who are willing to abandon all pretensions to the character and standing of gentlemen for the hope of sordid gain, and are frequented by all classes of planters, though it is not to be understood that all planters resort to these houses. These are men of high and honorable virtue among the planters, who equally detest the mean cupidity of men who keep these houses and silly wickedness of those who support them. Billiards is the game regarded as the most polite amongst men of education and fashion, but cards, dice, and every kind of game, whether of skill or hazard, are openly played in these sinks of iniquity. So far as my knowledge extends, there is not a single district of 10 miles square in all the cotton region without at least one of these vile ordinances, as they are frequently and justly termed. The keeping of these houses is a means of subsistence resorted to by men of desperate reputation or reckless character, and they invite as guests all the profligate, the drunken, the idle, and the unwary of surrounding country. In a community where the white man never works, except at the expense of forfeiting all claim to the rank of a gentleman, and where it is beneath the dignity of a man to oversee the labor of his own plantation, the number of those who frequent these gaming houses may be imagined. My young master, fortunately for his own honor, was one of those who kept aloof from precincts of the taverns, unless compelled by necessary business to go there. But the band of conspirators who had resolved on this destruction invited him through one of their numbers, who pretended to wish to with him concerning his property, and to meet him at an ordinary one evening. Here a quarrel was sought with him, and he was challenged to fight with pistols over the table around which they sat. They at the bar getting tipsy. My master, who it appears was unable to bear the reproach of cowardice, even amongst fools, agreed to fight. And as he had no pistols with him, was presented with a peer belonging to one of the gang, and accepted their owner as his friend or second in the business. The result was as might have been expected. My master was killed at the first fire by a ball which passed through his breast, whilst his antagonist escaped unharmed. That's them duels. they wow. A servant was immediately dispatched with a letter to my mistress informing her of the death of her husband. She was awakened in the... That's the baby saying mama. Yeah. She was awakened in the night to read the letter, the bearer having informed her maid that it was necessary for her to see it immediately. The shock drove her into a feverish delirium from which she never recovered. At periods, her reasons resumed at its dominion, but in the summer following, she became a mother and died in childbed of puerperal fever. I obtained this account from the mouth of a black man who was traveling servant of the eldest son of my master, and who was with his master at the time he came to visit the tenant to whom he let his sister's estate in Georgia. The estate to which I was now attached was advertised to be rented for the terms of 7 years, with all the stock of mules, cattle, and so forth upon it, together with 17 slaves, 6 of whom were too young to be able to work at present. The price asked was $1,000 for the first year and $2,000 for each of the 6 succeeding years. The tenant to be bound to clear 30 acres of land annually. Wow, they just rented it with everyone included. Before the day of which the estate was to be let, by the terms of the advertisement, a man came up from the neighborhood of Savannah and agreed to take the new plantation on the terms asked. He was immediately put into possession of the premises, and from this moment I became his slave for the term of 7 years. Fortune had now thrown me into the power of a new master, of whom, when I considered the part of the country from whence he came, which had always been represented to me as distinguished for the cruelty with which slaves were treated, I had no reason to expect much that was good. I had indeed, from the moment I saw this new master and had learned the place of his former residence, made up my mind to prepare myself for a harsh servitude. But as we were often disappointed for the worse, it sometimes happens that we are deceived for the better. This man was by no means so bad as I prepared to find him, and yet I experienced all the evils in his service that I had ever apprehended. But I could never find it in my heart to entertain a revengeful feeling towards him, for he was as much a slave as I was, and believed of the two the greater sufferer. Wow, he's identifying with the master here. Very interesting. Perhaps the evils he endured himself made him more compassionate of the sorrows of others, but notwithstanding the injustice that was done me, while with him, I could never look upon him as a bad man. At the time he took possession of the estate, he was alone and did not let us know that he had a wife until after he had been with us at least 2 weeks. One day, however, he called us together and told us that he was going down the country to bring up his family, that he wished us to go on with the work of the place in the manner he pointed out. And telling the rest of the hands that they must obey my orders, he left us. He was gone full 2 weeks, and when he returned, they just stay there. That's wow. I'm sorry for those who just joined us in chapter 13. They just keep leaving them and they just keep staying. That's very interesting. He was gone full 2 weeks, and when he returned, I had all the cleared land planted in cotton, corn, and sweet potatoes, and had progressed with the business of the plantation so much to his satisfaction that he gave me $1. with which I bought a pair of new trousers, my old one having been worn out in clearing the new land and burning logs. My master's family, a wife and one child, came with him, and my new mistress soon caused me to regret the death of my former young master for other reasons than those of affection and esteem. This woman, though she was my mistress, I cannot call her lady, was the daughter of a very wealthy planter who resided near Milliville and had several children besides my mistress. My master was a native of North Carolina, had removed to Georgia several years before this, had acquired some property, and was married to my mistress more than 2 years when I became his slave for a term of years, as I have stated. I saw my families and was acquainted with the moral character of many ladies while I lived in the South. But I must, in justice to the country, say that my new mistress was the worst woman I ever saw amongst the Southern people. Her temper was as bad as that of a speckled viper, and her language when she was enraged was a mere vocabulary of profanity and virulence. My master and mistress brought with them when they came 12 slaves, great and small, 7 of whom were able to do field work. We now had on our new place a very respectable force, and my master was a man who understood the means of procuring a good day's work from his hands, as well as any of his neighbors. He was also a man who, when left to pursue his own inclination, was kind and humane in his temper and conduct towards his people. And if he had possessed courage enough to whip his wife 2 or 3 times, he promoted violence now, as he sometimes whipped his slaves, and to compel her to observe a rule of conduct befitting her sex, I should have had a tolerable time of my servitude with him, and should in all probability have been a slave in Georgia until this day. Before my mistress came, we had meat in abundance, for my master had left his keys with me, and I dealt out the provisions to the people. Lest my master should complain of me at his return or suspect that I had not been faithful to my trust. I had only allowed others, for I feared in common with the others, 1 meal of meat in each day. We had several cows that supplied us with milk, and a barrel of molasses was among the stores of the provision. We had mush, sweet potatoes, milk, molasses, and sometimes butter for breakfast and supper, and meat for dinner. Had we been permitted to enjoy this fine fare after the arrival of our mistress, and had she been a woman of kindly disposition and ladylike manners, I should have considered myself well off in the world, for I was now living in as a good country as I ever saw, and I much doubt it there's a better one anywhere. He just done forgot his family and everybody. I'm sorry. Our mistress gave us a specimen of her character on the first morning after her arrival amongst us, by beating severely with a raw cowhide the black girl who nursed the infant, because the child cried and could not be silenced. I perceived by this that my mistress possessed no control over her passions, and that when enraged she would find some victim to pour her fury upon without regard to justice or mercy. When we were called to dinner today, we had no meat and a very short supply of bread, our meal being composed of badly cooked sweet potatoes, some bread, and a very small quantity of sour milk. From this time, our allowance of meat was withdrawn from us altogether, and we had to live upon our bread, potatoes, and the little milk that our mistress permitted us to have. The most vexatious, I like that word, vexatious. The most vexatious part of the new discipline was the distinction that was made between us, who were on the plantation before our mistress came to it, and the slaves that she brought with her. To this latter, she gave the best part of the sour milk, all the buttermilk, and I believe frequently rations of meat. We were not on our part, I mean us, the old stock, wholly without meat, for our master sometimes gave us a whole flinch of bacon at once. He loves bacon, by the way. This he had stolen from his own smokehouse. I say stolen because he took it without the knowledge of my mistress, and always charged us in the most solemn manner not to let her know that he had received it. She was as negligent of the duties of a good housewife as she was arrogant in assuming the control of things not within the sphere of her domestic duties, and never missed the bacon that our master gave us because she had not taken the trouble of examining the state of the meat house. Obtaining all the meat we ate by stealth through our master. Our supplies were not regular, coming once or twice a week, according to circumstance. However, as I was satisfied of the good intentions of my master towards me, I felt interested in his welfare, and in a short time became warmly attached to him. Note to self. He feared but little better at the hands of my mistress than I did, except as he ate at the same table with her. He always had enough of comfortable food, but in the manner of ill language, I believe my master and I might safely have put our goods together as a joint stock in trade, without either the one or the other being greatly the loser. I had secured the good opinion of my master, and it was perceivable by anyone that had more confidence in me than in any of his other slaves, and often treated me as the foreman of his people. Last paragraph. This aroused the indignation of my mistress, who with all her ill qualities retained a sort of selfish esteem for the slaves who had come with her from her father's estate. She seldom saw me without giving me her customary salutation of profanity, and she exceeded all other persons that I have ever known in the quickness and sarcasm of jibes and jeers with which she seasoned her oaths. To form any fair conception of her volubility and scurrilous wit, it was necessary to hear her, more especially on Sunday morning or a rainy day, when the people were all loitering about the kitchens, which stood close round her dwellings. She treated with my master with no more ceremony than she did me. Misery loves company. It is said, and I verily believe, that my master and I felt a mutual attachment on account of our mutual sufferings. That is the reading and the end of chapter 13. He got shuffled around again. Now he's out of Carolina and he's down all the way in Georgia, and he thought life was good. I still don't understand why they just kept staying there. But for those who just joined us, we're at the end portion. If you have something to say, feel free to do so. Type it in the box or hit us up on social media, and we'll say a question or comment. Anyone on the phone at this time would like to say or share what they felt, feel free to do so. As I said in the beginning, for the rest of the month, we're going to try to double up. So in the beginning of the month, we could start the new reading on Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Sorry, I blanked out for a second, by Harriet Jacobs. So if you don't have that book, it's very inexpensive, but there's also a free online copy of which we'll share as well. And so we're almost finished. This book has 20 chapters. We're after chapter 14. So we're just going to double up for the rest of the chapters here. And again, very eventful. Now it's not the master. He's attaching to the master, but now he's saying that it's the wife. And, it's interesting. He's saying that the master should have slapped up like he slaps up the slaves. So, just listening to the voice of Charles Ball as he's recounting his story really allows you to be present in the time that they were, and really see how oftentimes people who are being abused become attached to their abusers. And as I shared before, I was reading a book called Traumatic Bonding, and actually he's solidifying that he says he actually began to feel attached to his master because of the trauma of which they're both enduring. Even though he's still enslaved, he's finding some kind of attachment. So I had to mark that because that's kind of substantiating the thought process of what we're going through today. But again, for those who've joined us, this is the LEV Project. I thank you for spending your 30 minutes here with us today. And please join us tomorrow again as we read chapters 14 and 15 in the 50 Years in the Life of a Slave Girl. I'm saying 50 years in the life, 50 years and change, Salika. So until next time, everybody have a blessed day, and we'll talk soon.